The Ducks have a chance for a bounce back this week against an FCS opponent in Eastern Washington. And though they are a good FCS program, a premier one, as a matter of fact, the Ducks should still expect to win comfortably and see a lot of guys on the field. Here we go.
Are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, D1 play-by-play broadcaster and lifelong Oregon Ducks fan. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching this show. We just hit 1,000 subs on the YouTube channel. Thank you to everybody out there for making that happen. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And I am joined by a new guest here on Locked On Ducks. His name is Tyson Alger. He writes for the I-5 corridor and hosts the I-5 Corridor podcast, talking about all things Pacific Northwest college sports. Tyson, it's great to meet you, man, and even better to have you here on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Spencer. I'm happy to be here.
Well, Oregon fans, I think, are happy that there is another game to be played as this episode drops tomorrow. We're recording Thursday morning, and I think we're all just kind of ready to not see an 0-1 next to Oregon's record going forward, and just trying to get a win at this point. Probably doesn't matter who it comes against, but this is a really high-level FCS program in Eastern Washington, and they've been known for a number of things over the years, not just their double-digit wins against FBS opponents, but their high-flying offenses. And they played Oregon once in 2015. Final score with Vernon Adams at the helm, former Eastern Washington quarterback, 61-42. I expect this game to not even be that particularly close, Tyson. I think after that Georgia game, it's a reasonable expectation that the Ducks come in and just run them off the field and get anybody and everybody some playing time there on the back end of the 53-man roster, if that's how many there are. There might be more. That might be an NFL term. But anyway, there should be a number of guys who have the opportunity to see the field because of how this game should play out. How do you feel going into this one for the Ducks?
Yeah, I think this is definitely a get-right game for them. Scheduling Georgia and having that on the schedule for the start of the year, there were chances that when they scheduled that thing 7-8 years ago, that it could have been like a really timely matchup for the Ducks. But I think just between the coaching turnover and where this roster is compared to where a defending national champion might be, that was just a recipe for a disaster for Oregon, and it only kind of snowballed downhill as that game kept going. And so, I think, with Eastern Washington on the schedule, it's not only is it a team that Oregon is far more talented than, but it's just, after all the bad juju from the game last week, and then the fact that, you're finally unveiling Dan Lanning to the Oregon crowd. And, usually the first game for a head coach is kind of like a big celebration. I remember in 2017 when it was the start of the Willie Taggart era, and there was like the swag surfing thing on the sidelines, and everybody was getting way into that. Lanning didn't really get that because he had to face the best team in one of the best teams in college football week one. So, Eastern Washington is a very respectable FCS program, even though I'm a Montana grad and hate Eastern with every ounce of my being. But yeah, I think this is a game where Oregon should come out, and I would want them to look really good in all facets because we didn't really see any of that last week against Georgia.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that's in my mindset going into this game is, yes, it's still just the second game for this staff, but your talent gap is so severe. I would argue even greater than the one between Oregon and Georgia by a pretty sizable amount. This game should never be competitive. And I know it's just game number 2, but still you need to be able to go out there as a coaching staff and as a team and just physically dominate. And to me, anything less than that will be a little bit of a disappointment. Is it important to just get the win at the end of the day and stay healthy as well? Yeah, those are priorities number 1 and 2, but this is the sort of game where, Oregon's got a high 90% chance to win according to ESPN's football power index, it's FCS and FBS. Like winning shouldn't be the primary concern for Oregon fans here. How they win, I think, will be indicative of how the rest of the season may go in some sense. Because if they come out this week after getting punched in the mouth and their response against an inferior opponent is more sloppy play and a lack of execution, and looks like just a lack of energy at some points in time, that would be a concern to me.
Yeah, and talking about that talent gap too, it's fascinating looking at that because obviously Oregon, after the last 4 years of Mario Cristobal, this roster has been built to have more talent on paper than the Ducks have really ever had. And what's crazy is you can still see how far away they are from a team like Georgia, because those top 3 or 4 programs in college football have been getting better at an exponential rate. When you talk about like the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States in terms of recruiting, but Oregon's gotten a lot better. Whereas, so I'm I'm just interested to see like how far that gap is from an FCS team now, because you can go back and look at some of these traditional early season matchups, like when Oregon used to play like Nicholls State, and I remember it was Mark Helfrich's debut, and I think that was like a 66 to like 7. Back when Oregon would put up these video game numbers against these
Yeah.
teams. Just the sheer amount of talent that the Ducks have on this roster right now, like you should expect something like that. But this is also a game where I think Lanning and the staff are going to be able to play a lot more guys than they were against Georgia. Like, if a guy might be borderline ready week 1, you're probably not going to throw him out there against Georgia on the road in that sort of situation. So I think this is a game where you want to see the offense put together 2-3 strong drives right out of the gate, and then kind of start rotating players in there, because they certainly didn't get that gentle leeway in week 1 here.
Yeah, and I'll be looking for it on both sides of the ball. Execution is the biggest thing that I'm looking for, because I saw a defense that looked like they were late getting play calls in, and were missing assignments. And then offensively, you had situations where guys ran into each other in the backfield. Bucky Irving and Seven McGee got crossed up, led to an incompletion and a stalled drive. And you had the second interception from Bo Nix was kind of a jumbled, weird looking play. Like a couple moments, not all the time. There were some encouraging trends on offense. They overall moved the ball against Georgia. I mean, you had over 300 yards, but it goes back to execution, because if you have only 3 points with over 300 yards of offense, it's because you got on the other side of the 50, and then your offense was not able to move the ball down and convert. But Oregon didn't have a 3-and-out in that game against Georgia, Tyson, until I think it was late in the second half.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, once kind of the smoke settled from actually like seeing that it was like a 46-point defeat, is like you could pick a couple things out from that game as saying like, okay, this is something that could be a good sign for Oregon down the road. And I think I even tweeted it out maybe during like Oregon's second drive, but like I really liked some of like the play calling that they had. I liked some of the looks that they were showing. Whittington seems like he was getting 4 or 5 yards every cut that he would go up the middle. Like I like some of the like what they were showing on offense. It was just the execution of those drives. Like they get to the 50, they get into Georgia territory, and that's when those 2 turnovers happened. Like the first Knicks turnover was excusable, because it was one of the
Yep.
best individual plays I think
That's
I've
an
ever seen.
incredible play.
I think he probably could have thrown that ball a little bit earlier, but hey, you know what? It was 50-50 ball. Georgia made a play. The second one, especially coming down on the second drive where Oregon moves the ball again, and then to throw that pick, that was just kind of devastating. And I think that really kind of just, that was like the straw that broke the back for the Ducks, because, at that point, Georgia's up 3 or 4 possessions, and you're just not coming back from that. But yeah, like I think the offense showed some potential. And then if you go on defense, that was just a really rough look for Oregon's defense. And the fact that there were so many missed tackles and so many kind of like lost plays around the edge, especially for a team that, Lanning's coming in as the former defensive coordinator of the national champions. Like, this is like, of all the things that you wanted to see from Oregon, you probably wanted to see them at least looking sound defensively. And they looked like a mess. And I think that's okay. Like, it's week 1. It's a completely wild situation in terms of who they're playing and, everything that's led up to that game. But that's something that you want fixed immediately, especially when you're playing against an inferior team this coming week.
Yeah, that's something that I'm definitely watching for, and what I was talking about with the execution from it. I mean, missed tackles, missed assignment, and they just looked out of sorts. Just all the time, it looked like guys were not totally sure on enough plays where they were supposed to be. What else should we look for in this game against Eastern Washington? We'll get to that after. I remind you that BetOnline is your number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. Find all the latest college football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games and beyond as we enter week two. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including sports and scores, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball. Go Mariners, by the way. MMA, boxing, my personal favorite, golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. We continue on here with Tyson Alger of the I-5 Corridor podcast and writes at i5corridor.com. If you had to pick one thing, Tyson, that you really want to see from the Ducks that they didn't show against Georgia, or maybe something they did and can get even better on either side of the ball, what's the number one thing you're going to look for in this team and have you, maybe feeling some sense of confidence about, okay, they got better at that, so this coaching staff is capable of improving on a week to week basis?
Boy, that's a tough question because it's one of those things where I mean the thing that comes to my mind immediately is I just want to see some more explosion out of this offense. I think a lot of what we saw with them moving the ball when they were effective against Georgia was a lot of kind of dinks and dunks and maybe even some of the stuff that we kind of got used to from like the Mario Cristobal type of offenses from the last like 3 or 4 years. And that's because you're playing the number one defense in the country. It's probably hard to stretch the ball a bit. Um, but it's hard for me to sit here and be like, I really want to see them look better at that against Eastern Washington, because again, if Bo Nix is a starting quarterback in this game, which he's going to be, you would expect a 3-year SEC starting quarterback to look pretty good against the FCS Big Sky opponent. So I'm not going to really know what we're looking at in that regard until they play like a real opponent. Granted, if they come out and they can't like complete a pass for beyond 20 yards, like that might be a really big red flag. Um, but yeah, it's just like we talked a ton this preseason about the talent that Oregon has at wide receiver, whether it be Troy Franklin or Dante Thornton or Chris Hudson and just all those young guys that they have in there.
Chase Coda in there too.
Exactly. Chase Cota, who took one of the biggest hits I've ever seen in that
Oh
Georgia game.
man.
Like the view from the press box, we're up there pretty high and you can get the all 12. And you could see that one coming for about 3 seconds before you got hit. And I'm amazed he didn't break every single rib in his body on that on that play. Um, but yeah, they have all these dudes at receiver and like even like Seven McGee, like all these guys that can be explosive in an offense. Like I just want to see them do it. I feel like we've been talking about this for so long, and that's kind of the fun thing about some of these early non-conference games is you at least get a little like maybe preview of what this offense can be, and I just want to see some of those horses really start to run.
Yeah, I do too. And I was like you, okay with the first interception from Bo Nix. Like you took a shot, 50-50 ball. It's a sort of play that we haven't seen a ton of in recent years. I would have maybe rather seen it taken to a Troy Franklin, Chase Coder, or Dante Thornton, rather than Seven McGee, who's learned to play wide receiver in the last like month or
Right.
so. But I understand the philosophy there, and I'm with you. Like I want to unleash the skinnies as much as we can, because those are Oregon's, I believe, two highest rated wide receiver commits of all time, after Cameron Colvin, who was a class of, I believe, 2007, if
7, I
memory
think. Yeah.
serves. Yeah, and so those are guys that come in with a lot of potential and were certainly underutilized a year ago. And I think we saw glimpses of it. We've seen glimpses of it from both of them. Franklin had a good freshman season. Thornton came on a little bit more at the end. But I think it's easy to forget because there were so many games where Oregon didn't push the ball down the field. That Colorado game a year ago, I think, was maybe Troy Franklin's best overall as a Duck. He made contested catches. He had catch and run. He was really involved in the offense, and that's what I would like to see from Bo Nix, is develop a relationship with those two guys. Because when you watch a football game, particularly at the college level on TV, some guys pop off the screen and look different, right? Whether it's the way they run, the way they release the ball. Like Herbert throwing the ball, you watch it and you go, boy, that didn't look like everybody else. That's a different sort of arm talent. I watched Dante Thornton on TV, and he had a few catches in that game against Georgia, and he looked like he belonged out there with the Georgia defense, whereas some other guys like Seven McGee just look, outmatched physically. Even a guy like Chris Hudson, who I like, doesn't look like he's, on that sort of level from a physical standpoint. But Thornton really does. Franklin to a lesser extent, but I really feel like that's kind of the biggest sleeping giant in the Oregon wide receiver room. Like you look at his physical traits, I think he's put on a little weight from a year ago. He's a long strider. He's got great speed, good hands. I really think that's a guy that if Bo Nix were to develop a high level of chemistry with, could be between 80 and 100 yards receiving through the air every game.
Yeah, it's really when you think about it, like Oregon hasn't had like a go up and get it type of receiver probably since maybe like Dwayne Stanford on like the 2014-15 teams and
Maybe
like he
Dylan Mitchell. Dylan Mitchell,
yeah,
maybe.
I like Dylan Mitchell. Dylan Mitchell was a really good receiver. I'm not going to take anything away from him, but I also think he was a product of being like the one decent receiver on a team with Justin
Well,
Herbert at quarterback.
yeah, that's
Too.
true. That's true.
When nobody else can catch the ball and you are a borderline NFL talent, you're gonna get the rock a few times. But yeah, like Oregon just hasn't had those like traditional like big bodied receivers that like if like you're thinking like in your head of like a prototypical like big time college football game where there's maybe like a go up and get it like one-on-one play in the end zone. Like Oregon's never really had that dude when you're thinking about it of like, boy, this is the receiver that I think of. And Thornton, he's like 6'5", 6'6". Boy, he's one of the fastest guys on the team. Like he's one of those guys that when he gets the ball, you go like, why doesn't this just happen every time? And obviously he's a young player. He's in a new system again. He's getting things figured out. And Troy Franklin's I really like the way Franklin catches and accelerates right away. Like he's super
Yes.
smooth once he gets the ball. He catches in stride. He can run. Yeah, it's just one of those things of they have a lot of talent in that room though too, and it's just like who's going to really earn their spot. And Thornton has all the physical advantages. Like there's no guy in that room that looks like him. It's just we got to see him put it together, kind of consistent week in and week out now.
One thing we saw in that game against Georgia was a lot of running backs from the offense. And I don't know how that came off to you, Tyson. I haven't seen a team go with four running backs. Jordan James, I think, got carries in there because it was out of hand by the end of it. But there was clearly a concerted effort from the Oregon coaching staff, Carlos Lachlan, Kenny Dillingham, the offensive coordinator, of course, Dan Lanning, to get all those guys touches. We saw everyone. And it wasn't, just one carry like you're trying to get them a touch and make them feel good about where they are in the depth chart or anything. Did you think that the order they came out is indicative of what we'll see going forward? Or do you think they were kind of using that game as a way to evaluate the running backs they have because no one has distinguished themselves so far after fall camp? Because they're all kind of unique in a sense. I think Irving and Whittington are probably the most similar, but each guy brings a different element to the running back position. What'd you make of all those guys getting a lot of touches and carries?
Yeah, it was certainly interesting in the press box when Oregon came out for their first possession and Irving was in the backfield and everyone was just kind of like, huh, wasn't quite expecting that one. But that's the thing is, between like the two guys they picked up in the offseason on like the transfers, and like the fact that like Dan Lanning went out and like talked Sean Dollars into coming back. He talked like Seven McGee. I know he's playing wide receiver, but he's kind of hybrid there. Like they brought a lot of depth into this position, a lot of like experience depth. And if I'm them and I'm playing against Georgia too, like I probably don't want to have like my starting running back take 30 carries against that Georgia defense in a non-conference games too. Like I think a little bit of this was let's spread it out, let's get all these guys carries and looks, and not have anyone too dinged up for once the games start counting here.
A lot of players struggled against Georgia. The team, of course, don't know how it could have been much worse. But were there any individuals on either side of the ball that stood out to you that you think are primed for a bounce back showing against this Eastern Washington team that you watched in the Georgia game and thought, man, I thought he would bring a little bit more?
I wouldn't be surprised if if Justin Flo has like 25 tackles and 3 sacks in this game. I mean, just you know, like this is a kid who can be so dynamic and has been wanting to play football so badly for the last 2 years, and injuries have really caught up with him. And you saw that one game last year, the one game he played last year where he had I think 14 tackles and a couple sacks and TFLs, and
Forced
this
fumble
George,
against Fresno State too.
yeah, and so this I'm assuming the Georgia game was pretty frustrating for him because it's like this is, the first meaningful football game he's played in his college career, and you're playing against a whole team of guys, a whole team of Justin Flows out there. And obviously he had that late hit against Stetson Bennett that ended up being a flag. I think you line Justin Flo up there in front of the home crowd against an Eastern Washington team. I think he's just going to go nuts in that game. And I think he's the type of player where like that makes a difference too. Like I think Flo needs to get a couple of like really good games under him and have that momentum going, because like this is a guy that I really think can transform Oregon's defense if he's healthy and he's focused.
Yeah, his physical gifts are undeniable. We've
Yeah.
seen them. One thing I'm watching for with him is how he progresses with his intangibles in football IQ over the course of the season. Because he had the big hit on Stetson Bennett, he had a number of tackles, made a couple plays, but if you watch the whole game and just kind of watch how he performed, there were a number of instances where he was out of position or he did
Yeah.
not play
He's
his
almost,
assignment the way. Yeah, he did not play his assignment the way he was supposed to. And I look at that and I wasn't particularly surprised because one
yeah.
thing I'd said about him coming into the year is I don't know how this guy's going to be in pass coverage. I know he's going to be able to stop the run because that's just about getting in there and hitting people. And he does that as well as any linebacker in the country, as far as we can tell. But pass coverage assignments and understanding the discipline that comes with that comes from experience. And the guy just hasn't played college football, right? At the high school level, he can just go wreck a game because he's physically more talented than everybody else on the field. But it's different at the college level, and you can only develop that sort of chemistry and comfort on the defensive side of the ball when you actually play.
Well, and it's got to be a learning experience for Noah Sewell to learn how to play with Justin Flo, and for Justin Flo to learn how to play with Noah Sewell. I mean, for the last 2 years, any player that has the ball, like Noah Sewell's been the big dog on the field. Go get him, go wrap him up. You're the most physical guy out here. Like it's his job. And anytime that Justin Flo's played football, he's been the big dog out there. It's 2 5-star linebackers as talented as Oregon's ever had. And yeah, like they're going to have to play discipline, because that was the thing. What you were just talking about is the one thing I noticed with Flo. The most of that is, if he thinks he can make every play, like that's great in his head, but he can't make every play. And if you're over pursuing or you're getting out of position, or you're, I think there's just going to have to be some give and take in terms of communication, and just like those two learning like what the other person can or can't do.
Last thing I want to ask you about heading into this Eastern Washington game is something a number of Oregon fans have talked about with me here on the YouTube channel for those of you watching, and that's that another game where the score is lopsided and another game where Ty Thompson doesn't see any action. And I understand it in this particular game against Georgia because, look, even in Georgia's second string defense might be the best defense Oregon faces all season long. I could very easily be the case, and you want to get as many reps out there for Bo Nix and company as you can in week one, because if that's the guy that you're committed to as your starting quarterback for this year, you've got to get him as many game reps as you can. It's not like he's been on Oregon for the last couple of years and knows all these guys and has made a bunch of throws and such. Like, you're still trying to work on that. But an FCS game can get, and I hope it does, get so out of hand that you are putting reserve guys in. Do you think that they'll stick with that mindset of we want to get Bo as many reps as possible in game situations with the guys? Or if Oregon does what I'm expecting them to do and what they should do, and blow the doors off Eastern Washington and it's 40-7 midway through the third quarter, is that a point where you would expect to see Ty Thompson and or Jay Butterfield get into the game?
I just feel like at this point it would be like doing both of those players a disservice to not play them in that situation. I mean, like I understood like last year, we barely saw any Ty Thompson, with Anthony Brown as starting quarterback, and I think a lot of that was, Mario Cristobal was coaching a team that he was trying to to leave. Essentially, he always wanted his best player on the field, and I don't think they ever really wanted the risk of going through
Growing
kind of
pains.
the growing pains. Like that, if Anthony Brown was 1% better than Ty Thompson, Cristobal was going to play him last year. But like at this point, this is Ty Thompson's third year here. This is you would hope that going into next year when he's going to be a redshirt, it's hard to tell with the COVID years he's now, but you would hope by the time going into your fourth fall of next year that he would at least have like a handful of snaps under his belt. And I know he's played a little bit here or there, but like I would just love to see like a half of football from Ty Thompson. I mean, even just for the sake of like, let's say he's bad, and like it's at this point, like I'm not going to say Ty Thompson's bad because I've never seen him, but we've seen two coaching staffs now like look at him and choose somebody else. Like there's a reason why he's not playing right now. But like I just want Oregon fans to be able to see that, whether it's right or wrong, or maybe he's one of those players that he performs better like in actual game situations, and you give him a half and he goes nuts, and then we're having a quarterback discussion for the next like 8 or 9 months. But like I just want to see Ty Thompson. I want to see Ty Thompson. I want to see Ty Thompson. It's been 3 years of talking about Ty Thompson. Let's just see what he can do.
You are not the only person who feels that way. I can assure you his name is Tyson Alger, i5corridor.com and the i5 Corridor podcast, doing a ton of great work. First appearance here on the show, definitely will not be the last. Tyson, great to talk to you, man, and I look forward to the game this weekend.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.